Meeting will come to order. Welcome to a special Board of Directors meeting, a workshop for the 2022 annual budget, capital improvement plan. You all join me to salute to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Okay, for today's meeting, we're proposing that since it's a workshop, if the public would like to comment, just raise their hand. We won't have a special time for that. We'll take them as they go. So if you'd like to comment on individual projects or anything about the CIP today, raise your hand and we'll try to watch the screen. And with that, who's going to start off today?
Well, I'll start it off, and then I'm going to turn it over. So thank you, Board. Good evening. We are excited to be presenting kind of our first step in the improvement of the capital improvement program. And this is based off of input we received from the Board wanting to have a little bit of understanding of why the projects were selected that are selected, as well as a little bit more background information. I would just like to point out a couple of things. So for this particular capital improvement program that we're recommending to the Board, we did keep it very small from a revenue or cost perspective, just from the standpoint that we are trying to get our arms wrapped around the financial position of both of the major funds a little bit better before we start kind of taking larger bites of the apple. In future years, you start seeing a more robust CIP that's also extended beyond 1 year. In this particular situation, this is just a 1-year CIP. In previous years, and this is where I'll ask the gentleman to help me fill in the details of the history, is we have gone to the engineering committee to review the CIP, and there was actually a kind of a rolling 5-year CIP moving forward. This year, you will just be seeing the 1-year CIP being moved forward. From a budgetary standpoint, the district has traditionally only appropriated funds on an annual basis, and so we'll also continue that for this particular year. So what we have before us is basically 2 suites of projects, and they're separated by fund type. So for Water Operations Fund 10, what you'll traditionally see is that the projects are presented to the Board in the suggested funding priority order based off of funding source. So we have, and what you'll notice is we have kind of hydro projects separated from mostly water operations projects. From a business line perspective, in the future, recreation really is a function of the hydro business. And so you will see some of those modifications in how we start preparing the financials of the budget moving forward. And I think I'm going to not get into it in detail, but I did want to give a big thanks to Doug, especially. He did a lot of work on kind of bearing with me as we were going through and setting up this new process. It is a heavy workload to establish a new process like this the first year, just because it's a lot of documentation you have to create, a lot of paperwork that you have to create, and it was a new system for evaluating the projects. One thing to note is that we're kind of taking, like I referred to earlier, this is first step. I do anticipate that we'll make modifications based off of input from the Board or input from the public, and also just from our staff working with the process. So it's open to change, and it's only going to be changing for the better. So as we're going, if you have input on the format in general, please do bring that up. I do want to just highlight a couple of things, and then Doug's going to kind of go through the new forms on a general basis, and then we'll dive into the projects. So what you'll see in your packet is the long 11 by 17 sheet. This provides the scoring. Sorry, Director Holtwood. You'll see that there is the scoring matrix provided in both sheets. And so what we developed was 11 categories for scoring, and then there is a score associated with each category. So essentially, the higher the score, the higher prioritization that the project can get. Now, this is going to be one of those things that's a little bit of a struggle. So it's not anticipated to go through each score and justify why we gave something a 10 versus an 8 or 6 or anything like that. when you get in a room, you know, even the 5 of us got in a room and went through the scoring, we're never all going to agree on the scoring. It is a little bit subjective. However, it should be noted, the board, you know, this is a recommendation from staff. The board can certainly reprioritize projects based off of whatever your desire is. So our prioritization is meant to be informative. It's not meant to be, you know, the line in the sand that these projects have to be in this order. And what we also have proposed this particular year, we do feel that we can fund most of these items in this particular year. There may be some additional modifications to the number of projects that get moved forward based off of the priority once we get through the operation budgets and crunching of the revenue. And with that, I'll turn it over to Doug. He's going to review the scoring sheets and each category in general and what the thought process is behind it. And then we'll just take a quick look at the format for the new capital improvement sheets that will be included into the budget document.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Okay.
Hold on, do something that's supposed to do with this? No, you got to throw it.
Your battery? Turn it on. You can tell me, not good.
All right, go ahead and flip to the next screen.
Hang on a sec. It's not,
Maybe
letting
it's
me
not.
do, oh, look at that. There we go. Okay.
All right, okay. So, as Jennifer mentioned, we've got a new process on how we're gonna develop our CIP as we move forward. The idea is to give both staff and board additional tools to help better inform you and make our decisions related to the capital improvement. So we're gonna go through a couple things. The first thing is the project review committee. We used to have this back in the day, and so we're gonna bring this back. And the idea is that we're gonna have all of the senior staff, which is the managers from the different departments, as well as the AGM and the general manager. And we'll sit in the room and we'll have this meeting. It may be quarterly at first, it may be a little sooner, just to try to get all the projects put onto the list. We'll discuss the project, we'll go through, we'll all score the project, then we'll develop the sheets that you see in your packet. And then that project will be put into the prioritization based on the decision from management staff. So that'll be coming forward. I don't know when the first one is, but anyway, that's kind of the process and how that'll work. And this is gonna be a living document, right? We may have a project that's prioritized for 3 years or 4 years down the road, and then it fails. So all of a sudden, that's now gonna be priority 1. So there's always gonna be movement and stuff with regards to this, so it will be a living document. And then I'll go through the prioritization. As Jennifer mentioned, we have the 11 components that we look at when we score these projects. And so I'll go through each one, just kind of give you a brief understanding of what the thought process behind each section and how we look at these projects. And then we'll go through the projects, both for the water fund as well as for hydro. So that's kind of the plan for tonight. Go ahead, Chris. Okay. It's a little hard to read, isn't it? Luckily, it's in your packet.
Right.
Your screen. So I'm gonna use this screen right now. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through each one of these, well, let me back up.
Trying to do that for you, it's not gonna work.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh,
geez.
there, there.
Oh, there you
Okay, yeah, scroll up a little bit to the first one.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So this is an overall
Can you go
summary,
over?
summary sheet. So these are all the projects that we're, recommending at this point move forward with for the 2022 budget, with regards to the CIP program. So that's just a summary sheet that you have, which shows all the scores for all the different projects. And so now what I'll do is I'll just go through each one and just give you a little information as to how we look at these and how we score projects associated with that. So, with the first one, capital costs. And this is really looking at, is the project lower future capital improvement, capital costs, or is it potentially higher? And it's best if I use examples, I think, to help you understand what we're talking about. So, one example would be like a water treatment clarifier. The inside of the clarifier can be replaced. So we can fix and paint the tank on the outside and allow that facility to go longer into its useful life, instead of having to replace the whole structure all at one time. So it's reducing our future capital costs by making improvements to
certain components and replacing others. We also look at whether, I think that was it. First was replacing the entire structure. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I got lost in my notes. So anyway, I think that's pretty straightforward. I don't know if you have any questions, maybe.
So you mean like using your clarifier example, you're saying because we're able to extend the life, it's going to lower our future capital cost, because it's gonna, we won't have to buy it as soon?
Right, and we won't, it'll extend its life. We also don't have to replace the whole unit. We can rehab the structure and just replace the gut.
Yep.
Which allows us to push it forward. It also potentially gives us better efficiencies in the treatment plant.
Right.
Which means that we don't have to worry about expansion maybe as soon, because we can push more water through the clarifier,
Yeah.
things like that.
It would be like tank paving would be another one.
Right,
Yeah, exactly.
good, okay.
Yeah. So if you have any questions on that one, additional questions. The second one, O&M, that's pretty straightforward. Just means that the project would actually, hopefully improve or lower our operating costs. One of the things you look at would be an example like an open canal, where we can reduce or eliminate the need to fix leaks, remove trees, trimming, storm damage, cleaning, need for regular inspection, that kind of stuff. So by building the project and encasing it, kind of get away from that and not have to be dealing with on an annual basis, which lowers the O&M costs. Next one's increased potential revenue. This is whether we expected associated change in revenue, whether that's increase in customer base or efficiencies. Again, one of these would be like a canal that would have a moratorium. We have to replace a siphon that's undersized and outdated, so we north the canal, for example. That lifts the moratorium, allows existing customers to purchase more water, allows new customers to come on and purchase water. So by installing that facility, we're actually going to increase revenue in that canal. So that's kind of the thought behind that. Health and safety, I think this one's pretty straightforward. Example would be when we switch from chlorine gas to liquid. That substantially reduced the risk of both our staff as well as the neighborhood. Chlorine gas is a much more toxic and concerning chemical to have on site. Environmental, this would be, Hemphill would be a prime example for this one. Currently acts as a fish barrier. By building the project, we're going to improve the environment in that fishery area to allow those fish to migrate further up past our structure. And you can see in here, we've got kind of points 10, 5, and 0. That part's probably pretty straightforward unless you have a specific question on that. So next one is distributional and hydro generation effects. And we've got kind of two different pots, right? So we try to make these work for both hydro work as well as the water fund. So what we look at on this one is likely the, like for water, would be the number of customers affected by the project. So an example would be if we improve an inlet to a canal that feeds multiple canals, it's going to have a regional benefit. It's going to have an ROI. You may make improvements to a canal that may only serve 20 customers. It's going to have a neighborhood benefit. What we're doing is much smaller, kind of like with the treatment plant as well. The treatment plant's going to have a regional benefit when we make improvements to a pump station that may be relatively small, that may only serve 20 or 30 customers. While important to them, it's a relatively narrow scope in terms of benefit. So we rank them according to that. Critical infrastructure. This is what happens if potential disruption to service should the project be deferred. We decide not to do it. We keep pushing it out further. Will there be a bigger impact? And obviously, having a system that feeds 20 customers is going to have a different impact than something that feeds several hundred or several thousand. Again, example, this would be a treatment plant. If we choose to ignore the clarifier and just keep pushing it along and hope it keeps going, it may suddenly fail. That's going to potentially impact a very large number of folks. So it would be a much higher score than, like I said, a small canal. Next one is board strategic plan goals. This is just meeting goals that the board set. We've gone through that before, and I think you guys are going to be moving forward and doing that again, and setting those up. An example could be, again, the canal encasement, which may meet goal number 4, which is integration of practices and technologies to enhance efficiency and reliability, right? So by encasing the canal, we're making efficiencies and improvements, reducing water loss. That would be something that would be meeting the goals of the board. Certainty of funding, this just has to do with where the funds come from. Most projects and the smaller projects are just going to be dealt with through our normal program, our capital improvement program. There may be larger projects that require funding from outside, bonding, may require grants, et cetera. So the more unknown or non-guaranteed funding source, the lower the score is going to be for that project. Next one is create a new capital asset which will improve the fund balance. Basically what it's saying is, do we have an asset that will have associated revenue that will offset the cost of having it? We gave this one a lower score in terms of only 5 points versus 10, like most of majority of our projects, we're dealing with existing customers, small, right? So the number of last one is improves or increases level of service. This would be for both existing and potential future customers. So the idea is a standby generator. Where you have a pump station that feeds a bunch of treated water customers that doesn't have a standby generator. When the power goes out, they lose water until we get our temporary generator in there. So their service is less than somebody else. So by having the standby generator on there, so it kicks on immediately, they don't lose their service even during an outage like a PSPS event, et cetera. So then that would improve the level of service. We also scored in there that if it actually impacts the existing, I'm not going to have to too often, but to get the score of real low, that just means that we've actually made it worse for some customers. So I'm assuming most of our projects probably won't get there. But anyway, that's the 11 scoring criteria that we look at. So any additional questions?
Director Johansson.
I have two. So if we impact some customers but make it better for the district, why would it get a low score?
Well, I never thought of it specifically with regards to improving the district.
Say that again?
Yes, so it would impact, so you impacted 5 customers, but overall it's better for the district? And that's where you have the range in the score, right?
So
that could potentially be a 6.
And number 5 on David Way, we're improving the pressure, the firefighting capacity at the hydrants, and our most destructive environmental event now is fire. So why wouldn't that get a higher score?
So if you want to, when we get to the individual projects, we'll go through them, and we can talk about that if you like. I can give you an idea of how we came up with the number. Yeah.
Great.
I just had a question about who developed the matrix. Did you guys come up with this, or is this an industry thing? Or I think it's very inclusive.
So it's a combination, right? When you look at various cities and other districts, et cetera, they do have some different types. So it was looking at those and then taking some from some groups and taking some from others and then adding some of our own stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a combination of things.
Yeah, we had to kind of meld several ideas together and then really work through it ourselves to make sure it was relative to the district, especially given, we predominantly have hydropower and water, right? So we had to kind of try to align those.
I have a couple questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. I have got a couple questions. One of the things that it would be helpful for me to see, and I know you kind of maybe cover it in some here, but it's like, what is the number of customers impacted? We've had recent discussions about one of the projects up on Loma Rica, how it ended up with, very few customers, which is not how it started. And then, and then there's other ones that have much greater number of customers that are impacted. So it gives us kind of a cost-benefit thing? It's like, how many people are we helping versus not helping,
Yeah, and so we should, as we improve our sheets, we can start to put some of that kind of
Yeah.
information in. I think David Way has in there roughly 90-some customers that it serves. And so it's really just gonna be a discussion among staff, right? When they only have 90 customers, but the impact of those 90 customers is gonna be really significant.
Right, right,
There's a lot of
exactly.
water.
Right,
Yeah.
but does it deserve a 10 because of the size of the project and its impact to the overall district customers, right?
Mhm.
That's where we sit and talk about it and decide, well, maybe that needs to be a 5 or 6, because yes, it's impactful should something happen, but it's a smaller group of folks that have to do
Mhm.
that, so.
Are you indicating it might be helpful to have that on one of the cover sheets?
Well, I think it would be. I think it would be. And it's not that it's the be-all and end-all, but
Right.
it's just another data point. How many customers are impacted along this line, like the David Way Pump Station?
That wouldn't be that difficult, would it, Chad?
No, I'm thinking though that this is captured a little bit in multiple categories.
Yeah, I know, I can see that it is.
But number 6 is the one that covers it, for the most part. Is it
About regional-
So is it a lot of customers?
Yeah.
Is it a limited benefit, or is it very small?
Right.
In the analysis of David Way, for example, it's actually rather small.
Uh-huh.
So, I think.
Well, maybe that's fine to leave it there, but that was just a
That's
question.
one example. So another example is increased revenue potential. Okay,
Mhm.
if this is a very
Or health and
large
safety.
project with a lot of customers, it changes your revenue potential. I mean, so, yes, it's in multiple categories here as we go through these, but again, this is our first go around, so.
I don't know if it would be helpful, because this is really helps staff to prioritize, and then it comes to the board. And so, it just occurred to me, that
No,
that's.
I don't think that it's a bad idea by any means. My internal struggle is going back to Rich's comment. If David Wade's, their ability to have water service, where does the line get drawn? Is it just straight numbers of customers served by project infrastructure? I think that's easy. Is the number of customers, an actual number benefited, that gets a little.
Right.
Yeah, let's,
I don't know, just
yeah,
think about it.
I'm noting all of these
Okay.
things, so we can go back and rehash it back out again.
Yeah, I think for a lot of them, we can give you an idea how many
Mhm.
customers are being impacted by a particular project.
Mhm.
I think that's probably relatively straightforward.
We'd have to limit it to the infrastructure, though.
I think you do have to limit it to the infrastructure.
Ancillary benefits,
Right.
right, okay.
I would think so.
Yeah, that'll be the.
And then, I've got 2 more questions.
Direct benefits, yeah, no, I think that's.
Terrific. So where would the watershed projects be, the NASA projects, like a meadow restoration and those kinds of things? Where,
Obviously, the, environmental impacts are gonna score high, right? So.
no, but I mean, I just wonder, are there, like, where do they,
Pulling those out of, general operations, the water.
So one of the, and we.
so they wouldn't, if those were not a CIP then?
They could be.
They could be.
It depends, when Greg and I had this discussion pretty in depth, so a lot of the projects that come out of NASA's shop,
Mhm.
they are grant-funded projects.
Right.
Usually what you'll see in grant-funded projects from a budgetary perspective is that the local match is covered through the operations budget as
Mhm.
opposed to the capital budget. We could try to modify that, and or you could do it one of 2 ways. You can just have it not identified in the budget, have the funds required for the grant application and the local match in the operational budget, and then we come back to the board and request approval to apply for the grant.
Mhm.
And then at that time, if we get the grant, then you make it a project. You can also put in an unfunded capital project in the capital program and just not fund it in the budget. So there's just 2 different methods, and I've seen both with dealing with it. It's, I think for this baby step, we're trying to make it less complicated.
Okay, I appreciate that. So, then, let me ask, if I could just go down my list and then I will be quiet. Is there a way the environmental seems to be to, improve or not improve, but there's not a CEQA piece in here. It's like, is this project gonna require full CEQA? you know, is just sort of like, does that enter into your process at all?
So it enters into it when you get to the individual projects.
Mm-hmm.
One of the lines within that summary sheet that you see for each individual project tells you what we think we need to do. Whether
Okay.
it needs to be a mitigated neg deck, whether it needs to be
Right.
an EIR or it's exempt.
Okay.
Sometimes those change depending on what you find. So when you first put things together, you're making a best guess assumption on what we think you need. If it's replacement of a few thousand feet of pipe in a roadway, it's gonna be exempt.
Yeah.
You know, if it's a real straightforward project.
If it's a Hemp Hill fish diversion, it's gonna need a full-on
But if
sequence.
it's gonna
Yeah.
be something more, right? So
Yeah.
whether it's gonna need permits, we have that in there too, whether it's permits,
Okay.
et cetera. So, and when we go through that first one, I'll kind of go through that sheet, kind of point some
Okay.
stuff out. So it's not specific in the scoring in terms of the environmental side, because regardless of what kind of environmental document we have to do, we need to do the project. So really,
I
it
see.
comes down to
Okay.
what kind of money we need to put in and how long we think it's gonna take to get through an environmental process in order to build it, right? If we think I'm gonna do an EIR, there's probably a good chance I'm not gonna build it the same year I'm doing the EIR.
Right.
It's gonna take time and effort, right? So it's gonna get spread out over multiple years.
Okay, and then my last comment would be, if I were using this document, which I'd love to do, because, by the way, great work, everyone, I mean, superb work, it would be really great to have a bottom line of the cost estimate, so that you could at a glance go, okay, so this is a one-year outlook, it's X millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Let's look at the sheet, the first sheet, and we'll show.
No, I know, but I'm just saying that,
Oh, we have that on the slideshow, but we can,
I think she's talking about on the scoring sheet.
I'm talking about on the scoring sheet.
just have it on each individual sheet.
Yeah, just add the
Like
total
your
project cost
A
up
bottom
here.
line, but.
Yeah, a bottom line of the total project cost or estimate, it doesn't have to be
Engineer's estimate.
On that,
engineer's estimate or, yeah, or something.
on the summary sheet.
Your final.
All right.
And
So you have a one-shot.
so I have a one-shot picture, and I don't have to go digging for the cost.
We have it in the scope, but not in your packet, so we can do that for sure.
That'd be great.
Great.
And then lastly, so after we go through this, this is a workshop, then what do you see as the process for what happens? Is the board eventually take action, like, yes, we agree, take this and run with it, and then staff begins to do the projects, or, like, what is the process from here, once you've done your scoring, and once you've, come up with your priorities?
Well, our understanding is we would identify, these are the projects we're proposing for the 2022 budget.
Uh-huh,
And so, we're gonna talk about them today, so when you actually get the budget that you're gonna be looking at and ultimately adopting and approving, it's gonna have those in there as what staff is recommending to the board to approve, so that we can build it in the following year.
So each of those dollar items that say 2022
Yep,
are gonna show in the budget
yep,
from this
Mm-hmm.
yep.
Yeah.
It'll show in the capital.
capital, yeah.
component.
that's really helpful, because it gives us a big kind of, 360 view of where the money's going and what projects and so on, so.
Right.
And so we'll pair this information with, from this workshop for capital, and then the operating budget. And based off of the input we receive, we'll make adjustments, do
Mhm.
some final crunching, get some final input from staff, and roll that into the annual budget that you will take for consideration.
Got it, okay.
The goal today is to get input on the project. Do you generally agree with the prioritization? Are you not liking it? What is it? And then let us know. And then based off of our revenue projections and what we see going on with the operating budgets, we'll put it all together into one package and bring it back.
Got it, okay, thank you very much, thank you, Mr.
You're welcome.
President.
Welcome, Karen.
Yeah.
Sorry to be late again.
2 times in a row.
I know.
I have, somebody got a worse day than me,
Good.
49, 2 people.
Okay. So any other questions at this juncture about the matrix?
I'd have one
Oh,
more,
go ahead.
if they don't.
I'm not sure if you already covered this, and I apologize if you did. And it sounded like you were alluding to this, Ricky, but I'm just wondering if the criteria, and again, I want to hearken what Ricky said, this is an excellent piece of work. And
Mm-hmm,
it really helps us as board members to, I think at a high level, which is where we should be operating, better understand how you're thinking about the project. And these are excellent criteria. So my only question really is, when you looked at these 11 criteria, did you place them weight them equally, or did you say, because some of them, to me, like in health and safety, some of them kind of like, maybe those have a higher weight than others, but I didn't know if you looked at them all equally or you weighted them.
We did, right, so they're equally weighted, except for two of them which have a little bit less in terms of the point
Okay.
value associated with them.
Okay.
The highest point value for the most part is 10, and then there are 2 categories of a lower weighting at 5.
Well, what I mean is different than this.
Yeah.
I mean, did you weight
No.
the 11? For instance, is new capital asset will have associated revenue, blah, blah, blah. Is that weighted equal to capital costs, health and safety, environmental? So they're
Yes.
all equal?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
There's just less available points for some categories, and so they impact the total score more.
Okay.
Or, I'm sorry,
Yes, that's how you add.
Instead of weighting it, we did it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I have one other, just question on that we have a current draft budget, kind of out there. You kind of pulled it back a bit. At least we had it through the rate committee. You
Oh,
saw it.
yeah, I saw it, but no, I think that was a what if. It wasn't a draft budget, though.
Right, no, it
And-
was a what if.
It was a what if.
But that what if had,
5-year.
Yeah, it was a 5-year projection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
based on assumptions, but it had a allocation for the capital expenditure for 2022.
This was extrapolated from that. So what we're proposing for today is just a 1-year budget for capital. In the future, once we enhance this more, you'll see a more robust capital program that is a longer-term capital program that more aligns with what you would typically see in rate setting.
Okay, so just so I understand, for the purpose of the budget for 2022, we're doing a ground-up budget, you're not feeding in the numbers into some preconceived
No.
value.
We didn't even take into consideration the draft rate study
Right.
when doing this.
Okay.
We went into this budgetary year with the idea of holding things either on par with last year or lower, till we can get a better handle on the health of each of the funds.
Okay.
And so once we can have, and, one thing, it might be a little alarming to some people, the capital program seems a little light this year. It's due to wanting to better understand the health of each fund's financial position. With doing some of the modifications that we talked about even yesterday, pulling up for the cost allocation and kind of looking at the different business streams a little bit differently, then we can kind of build into a longer-term program, longer-term projections, and then build the rates back on top of that, as opposed to letting the rates drive the budget.
Right.
Amen.
Amen. Yes, you have 5 amens.
And realize with all of this, the scoring priority, there's some things that will trump it regardless. Right? So
Sure.
you may have something that's relatively low in terms of priority, but it's a regulatory requirement.
Mhm.
Means we're gonna do it whether it has any real value to us in terms of other projects
Mm-hmm.
being less important.
Good
That's just the
point.
nature of.
Like, for instance, when FERC comes online, there's a big one, right?
Yeah,
A
right.
huge unknown, that during that rate talk, there we go, we fiddled with that number, we go, anybody's guess on that one, right? So,
Or it's not flat, it's spillway improvements.
Right.
Right.
We're getting direction from the,
Regulators.
to have to deal with it, so we gotta deal with it sooner than later.
Any more questions? Oh, you have another one?
2 quick ones. I just wanted to segue on what Ricky was saying about environmental projects. I would concern that Hemphill would be an environmental project out of our, that's why it's made the list, because it's coming out of our revenues.
It's also,
It's also.
we have a mandate.
We haven't made
I
it.
understand that, but it's not like there's money attached to it to pay, there's not a grant money at this point to
Correct.
pay for it, so it shows up on our summary sheet.
It's going to be paid for out of the water fund.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Well, and I think there'll be a lot of grants. I think there'll be a lot of grants.
Yeah, you can have
Well, right.
overriding considerations for why a project gets moved up, and frankly, it could be the board, just the board's desire, right? It's the board's, purview to provide direction on prioritization, and that's like you say, you don't necessarily have to agree with the scoring. It is really up to the board. If you want something higher priority, then that's just what we do.
But Hemp Hill is something we have to do.
Right, yeah, so in the case of Hemp Hill, and you will see projects like that come up, that, you know, a good example is all the new air quality rules. You'll see us having to replace generators or large equipment just to meet the new air quality rules. Same thing. You know, we don't really have a big choice in the matter, even if it ranks low.
So, in our sheets here, any of these being funded by capacity?
None of those in this one are.
Okay, and how much, I forget, how much do we have in the capacity fee fund?
I don't
Do you
know
know,
that
Debbie?
one.
Like 7 million right now?
7,
Yeah.
which is not a whole lot of money, yeah.
I didn't hear.
7 million?
Pay the mortgage, no.
You have a big house.
I mean, I guess some of those things could potentially,
That's a question too.
I guess we can take a closer look at that, like the clarifier and stuff, I don't know. Not really increase capacity, we can, but if we make some improvements and increase capacity, then we can use a portion of that to offset the cost, but it wouldn't necessarily carry over.
No, I understood, but I think the question then is, a lot of this seems to be maintenance versus capital improvement. So do we have a figure on, is it all maintenance or stuff that we have to do versus expanding
This
capital
particular
improvement?
capital program was primarily driven based off of the legal overriding considerations of Hemp Hill, really, and our desire to keep the budget equal to or lower than last year. That's what's really kind of driving what we're presenting. Larger capital projects, you know, are much more expensive than some of the maintenance type projects. But with that said, it doesn't mean that, we can't look for grant opportunities, and that we also can't, if we kind of get a higher comfort level over the next 6 months with the finances, the board it's more than appropriate for the board to take consideration of a new capital project mid-year, and we can always do a budget amendment as needed.
Right.
So this isn't always just a one-time shot.
Okay, I'm just trying to differentiate between maintenance and true capital improvement projects like the backbone extension program.
Yeah, you're talking about new facilities versus replacing existing ones, right? In maintenance, in this case, we're replacing an existing capital, facility with a new one. It's basically doing the same thing, right? So,
Right.
yeah, so it's still a capital program, not necessarily a maintenance project.
Is it safe to say that you're asking from the regards of, does it increase capacity versus just replaces what's existing and doesn't increase capacity? Is that how you're
Correct.
looking at it?
Right.
That's what I thought. So some of these, like David Way Pump Station, for example, doesn't increase capacity per se, but it gives us higher levels of redundancy and equipment that is past its life expectancy. Is that just maintenance? Not really. It's a wholesale replacement, but it doesn't add capacity, so point taken.
I would take the Hoagland flume. It was a 2-foot flume, increased to 3 feet. That extra foot increased double the capacity. I would say half of that is repair and maintenance, the other half is capital improvement.
Gotcha.
Well, that's a win-win when we can do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Dodie Ravine.
Okay, and Director Peters had a question?
Yeah, I echo what they're saying. This is really great to see. It's way more improvement from before, so thank you very much. So is the plan to do all of these projects this year?
Correct. I think all but one, the North Day Road, I've only got money in this year's budget, to do some of the work, and I think that's the one in the next year. And it shows on those individual sheets, and we can kind of go through that.
Okay.
But I would anticipate the main construction, but not in 23, but we have to do certain things in 22, whether that's the environmental document, get permits and right-of-way and some of that kind of stuff, which we just know takes time. So we're just not going to finish it all in one year.
Okay.
Yeah, with the caveat that once we take the operation budget and crunch the revenues and tie everything together, we may be presenting the list with 2 off the bottom.
Okay.
And that's the purpose of the prioritization.
That's good. But I like that, because then we're for sure planning on doing these projects. And prior CIPs, programs from year to year to year, the very same projects are on there. I'm going, well, what, aren't we supposed to do those? And that they were in the, CIP last time, so they were always, anyway, so this is good. I appreciate it.
And that's a great point I don't think we addressed in the beginning, is this is moving away from programmatic budgets. This is going, you're gonna be seeing project budgets. In the
Much better.
future, you may see, we're looking at doing a, water line main replacement in this general area, and we generally think it's gonna be this many feet, but we would squeeze as many feet out of it as we could get with the funding we had. But outside of that, you're not gonna see these large programmatic budgets where the money's bouncing around within the program.
Yeah. I'd like to still track, though. I wouldn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater on that, because it's, to know in these programmatic categories, to make sure that we're covering our bases and that one particular category isn't overtaking all of the rest, and so we're not doing any PRVs or any of this because we're only doing that. So just to keep the check, to make sure we're keeping our eye on all of our infrastructure and not getting swayed by, just this. So just so we can keep an eye on how we're tracking in those buckets.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll be able to do that, whether it's something that's going to change from what we have now, right? We have those 6 or 8 different funds.
Yeah.
We can do this project and go and this and this one, but,
Yeah.
we can definitely keep track of that.
Yeah.
This is treated water, raw water, this is what we're spending.
Right.
Today on these different programs, actually.
Yeah, and the projects that were in there, then you could leave them in that, and then we'd know that this capital budget, based on these engineers' estimates, this is what we're gonna be spending doing this type of work.
And I think a lot of that will naturally flush out when we start doing the multi-year CIP.
Yeah.
So you would see it laid out with all categories over the course of the period.
Right, because when you look at it this way, you don't really see which ones are it's
Right.
to kind of cluster them and keep them. I think, to me, that would be helpful. I don't know.
Can I just have a clarifying question? So Doug, you said we're gonna fund, or we would propose to do all of these projects this year. Are you speaking of both water and hydro projects that are identified in the sheets, or just water?
Well, I can speak in terms of water.
Yeah, so we, if
That's nice.
Yeah, it rolls back. So we propose to spend the money on the hydro jobs as well. That may mean we're designing next year and then constructing the year after. But yes, every job that has funding to it, we expect to make progress on next year.
Okay,
But not necessarily construct a complete job.
okay.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yours are bigger, yeah.
Yeah, the only reason why a project would be removed from what we propose is for revenue reasons. If we just don't have enough money, we have to start making.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Of course, all projects can still be delayed, right? We may go out there and find something that requires us to halt and do a whole bunch of other stuff for whatever reason.
Thank you.
And ultimately, as we have the program built out, and we have more of these projects and they're all lined up, that's when we can then potentially come to the board and say, look, this one got derailed because of X, Y, Z. But we'd like to move on and do this one, which is the next one on the list.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
No, I just said it's so great to see a process
Absolutely.
that is thoughtful and prioritized, and it's great.
Okay, we'll go to the.
Carry on?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay, David Way, and this is just a kind of a highlight here up on the screen. You guys have the individual sheet, so you have a better idea what these sheets will actually look like and what you guys will be presented. So,
Just to clarify, that information is not in your packet, it's a
Correct.
summary of your sheet in your packet, just for visual purposes.
that's just the visual.
It's the exact same information, we just pulled out what we thought would be important.
Right.
Very good.
But since we're on this first one, maybe we'll kind of go through
Mhm.
through the sheet itself, so you get an idea of what's all in there. So on the David Way one, you see in that first section, we're identifying, obviously,
In your packet.
in the packet, I'm sorry. We're identifying the department, the program, we have the rankings for there, what division that's in, the facility types, who's gonna be, in charge of it, and then kind of an idea whether it's replacement, whether it's new construction, or it's just upgrading. It says in there multiple phases. That would be checked if we think the project's gonna spread out through multiple years, or we have multiple pieces to that, where we may be doing design and right-of-way and other stuff in year one, and then year two's construction, or maybe it's 2 years worth of construction, and you're gonna have to see that check to know that it's gonna spread out over more than just one posted year. Then the next thing, right up there as well, that last line in that first section, you got sequence. So for David Way, we would expect it to be in retention, we would just basically replacing it.
Right.
But if it needed something else, we would identify it there, as well as permit, and whether we think we need right of way. In this particular case, we already own the facility, so we're not worried about getting right of way. But some of these, deals that we may have to go out and get right of way from individuals, we'll try to identify that as best we can, based on the preliminary information that we got. So the next stretch is the project purpose. I don't know if you want me to just read through this first one, or just kind of go in general.
Yeah, just generally explain what it is.
Yeah, so it's a roughly 52-year-old pump station. It's existing, you can kind of see it there. So there's the pump station right there. That's the hydromatic tank, so it's a little hydromatic pump station, built in the late 60s, like I said, it's 52 years old. So several things are going on. There's no redundancy in that system. Typically, we want to have a pump station that has redundancy, so if we have to maintain or work on a pump, we don't have to turn people off. We did have Division of Drinking Water, but they didn't do anything specific. They did comment on the concern, the fact that we don't have any redundancy in that particular facility. In addition, it's one pump serves all, so it feeds the customers as well as runs the hydrants and the fire flows. Doesn't meet our typical minimum, which we try to do 1,000 gallons a minute, is what we typically shoot for in our system. It varies, of course, throughout, so that's much less than that. This pump is old. The motor can no longer be purchased, I think, so, anyway, we just need to replace it, which is why we're here doing that. And so what we'd be doing is installing a new one. And actually, this one, we went ahead and built it out, even though we talked about this one yesterday. You guys actually approved the prepackaged pump station, which is actually, makes things easier for us. We get more common materials, so we don't have to have less spare parts everywhere, because our pump stations become more uniform. It gets constructed and dropped off on the site, and then we have to construct and put it into service. So it'll have 2 pumps, so that we have a backup pump for the domestic, 2 pumps, and then a fire pump which runs on its own. Again, health and safety, we've got 90-some customers there. If this pump station goes out, they lose water.
And hydrants.
Yeah, 13 hydrants. And then, in addition to that, it's gonna lower the cost, right? This machine's gonna run much more efficiently. The pumps are gonna run well within their efficiency curves versus what we got now. So it's gonna be low overall electrical costs, et cetera.
So it automatically comes on when the fire hydrant's turned on, the big pump turns on?
Right, once it hits the pressure, right, once the pressure drops to a certain level, that pump's gonna kick on to make up the difference that the little pump's.
Now, it's the same pump as doing the whole job?
Correct.
Yeah.
Capacity of the pump,
The new one? The fire pump will be the 1,000 gallons a minute.
that's it?
It'll be rated at a minimum of 1,000 gallons a minute. That's a relatively small section. And then the other pumps will be based on the demand.
This project isn't where the new tanks are being built right now, right? This is not the same location, different location, okay?
Okay, all the CR tanks we talked about, no.
Yeah, okay.
Doug, I have just a question about this. So in looking at this photograph of the pump station, I see all this vegetation around, and so then I wonder, well, what do we do, if anything, about clearing for fire, so that these facilities that are so vital?
We couldn't put out our own fire.
Well, that was the point, is,
So in this particular picture, the driveway you see on the bottom right-hand corner is our property, but to the left of that pressure tank is not our property. It's
Really?
out in front of the pump station.
oh, brother,
Owner maintained that
As well as
footprint.
behind the tanks.
as well as behind the tank?
Yeah,
Correct,
correct.
yeah.
It's usually a relatively small little footprint.
Yeah, it's sandwiched within houses. all
Sandwiched, oh,
around.
gosh.
I want to say we've gone out and, the teams have gone out and cleared where we can at all of our pump and water facilities, but we do run into it in all over the place, that our little postage stamp is here, and yet it's surrounded by forested lands that are not. So it could be a difficult situation.
Thank
So I
you.
have a pump that does 1,000 gallons a minute. But I didn't pay that much
Well,
money for it.
whoop-de-doo.
So what we can add to that is the fire pump may do that, but keep in mind, during a high pressure or high demand event, all pumps will run. So you'll have the fire pump running, yes, but the demand pumps will also be running.
I just added,
And it's also all uphill from there, so.
yeah, there's a lot more going on.
Yeah.
So are we generally okay with the form as presented as
Perfect.
well?
Yes.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Okay. On the project description, you know, it's the proposed solution. And you had mentioned it's more convenient, it was determined that a prepackaged station was better than another. Do you look at other alternatives and step back and say, well, just because this was a pump station here 52 years ago, there's, with all of the changes in the district, there's no other alternative solutions that would work better, you know, just looking at alternative solutions that.
Sure, you want to look at that. In fact, we originally looked at this, at just replacing within the existing footprint, which really didn't work for us in terms of trying to add pumps and do some additional stuff there. But, yeah, that's part of the thing that engineering would be going through and confirming that this is the best case, right? In this particular case, you know, we're at a tank, which typically the tanks are on the top of the hill, so we're on the top of the hill, and then we're trying to pump up, so hooking it to a different pressure zone to try to feed it would be something we would look at. In this particular case, it doesn't make sense the system played out.
But is there any way on this form, I guess I know that's a hard thing to capture, that, you know, any alternatives are, like the one of them is that comes to mind, which we'll get to on hydro, the gates, you know, you picked an overshot gates, and, you know, why that, you know, just.
Yeah, and part of it too is when we're building these projects, a lot of these are gonna be relatively minimal input, right? So like when we looked at the Haight Canal, we looked at replacing the pipe at the front end in siphon number 1 and then doing some additional work. After we actually looked at it, we didn't need to replace siphon number 1, we made some improvements to the headworks and a couple of culverts that allowed us to push more water through.
Right.
So we don't necessarily know all those details until it becomes a project and we start working on it.
But by the time you get this sheet, you've already done that analysis.
Not necessarily.
No, and I think this also was the question, I believe, that Director Hull brought up. So you wouldn't see the alternative analysis noted on this sheet. This is the sheet that requires it starts the project. This approves the project for us to start working on it to do an alternative analysis. So you wouldn't see, so that would become after this starts.
That's a good clarification, that's.
We wouldn't go through all of the process of alternative analysis as a board, supportive of it, even the project.
Some of these times, some of these things we would have had discussions already when we're talking about projects and the need to do stuff, so we may have unofficially been talking about, you know, we need to replace this, need to upgrade that, but it doesn't necessarily mean we've gone through all those details yet.
Great, okay, yeah, so that's good, so I didn't know if that step had been done yet, okay,
Right.
yep.
So in some cases it may have had some work, in some cases it may not have had any yet.
I don't know what else.
And then that last stretch, within that project, you see the expenditures, you've got the cost estimate, what we think is gonna be estimated. And what you'll see in here is, what we spent prior years. We're kind of in this first year, so it's a little wonky how we're gonna identify that, but that was what you just approved as a board this year.
Right.
And so for 2022, what we have is 75,000 in there for the installation of it. We're gonna have to do some improvements on site in terms of rerouting, plumbing, et cetera. So that's what's in for this year's budget, because you've already purchased the material for last year's budget, but it's like a 30-week wait time for the pump station, so we're not gonna get it until next year anyway.
Wow.
So we're not gonna be able to install it in this year's budget, which is why we didn't include it.
And we're still working on this section a little bit,
Yeah.
just as far as, some items, depending on, you know, prior years would be actuals, and then the next column would be encumbrances, or carryovers. And so then you'll see what's being proposed for this current year budget, the 2022 column.
And the bigger projects are typically gonna have much more of that field filled out. So in the packet,
Overall, I like it.
It is general.
I'm sorry.
So, back to the question of alternatives, my assumption is that you would not necessarily present alternatives to the board unless those alternatives perhaps have, fairly equal merit and cost.
Not in
Otherwise,
cost.
you internally are gonna decide what the best alternative is, and you are gonna present that alternative to the board. And I just wanna kind of differentiate or clarify expectations. We're not gonna always see alternatives.
It's definitely, and specifically as it relates to CEQA, right? So categorically exempt projects are fairly simple, more straightforward within the current footprint, maintaining or improving a current system. Usually, their alternatives aren't even something really worth talking about with the board. That's more of an internal staff, working with maintenance, working with operations. If it's a project that requires full CEQA analysis, that's when you're gonna see this robust alternative analysis to substantiate the identification of the environmentally superior alternative.
Okay.
So I think it's kind of two different levels of projects.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, so let's just know the questions on that front page. So then on the back sheet of that, we'll actually have the individual scoring sheet for the project. And then we just put a location map, kind of give you an idea, and then a little more detailed map, and then a couple of pictures. Sometimes pictures help, sometimes you don't do get a whole lot of good. Pipe in the ground's hard to take a picture of. So anyway, that's kind of the packet for each project that we have, and we'll be building these binders that will have all these projects.
I think it's excellent.
Very
Just
good.
really excellent work. Thank you. And to all your staff who helped put this together.
So if you're okay, we'll go on to the next one.
Do you want to ask for any public? Just
Okay,
for a minute?
well, there's no hands raised.
Oh,
You don't see any hands raised, right?
No, I have it up in the bottom right-hand
but you
corner.
could call. You could say if any.
So I can monitor.
Oh, there's one.
Yeah.
There's one, okay. So we have a hand raised by, Nevada County Contractors Association. If you'd state your name and *9 your phone, or *6 your phone, then state your name. There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
And, good afternoon. I guess it's almost good evening. This is Barbara Basher with the Nevada County Contractors Association. And, really appreciate the opportunity to weigh in on this. So I wanted to build on a comment that Director Hull made yesterday about a strategy for infrastructure expansion and, in regards to new facilities. And, I guess I'm familiar with working with the city and the county on their mitigation fee program, and that, they usually do a 5-year to 20-year projection of what those capital improvements for expansion. So my question was more, I'm sure NID must have a document like that where they plan for the future and the expansion and, all of that and what they base the capacity fees on. I know that you expanded the E. George waste water treatment plant. So because I don't see any what I consider capital expansion projects in this. And so I was just curious if that was going to be handled separately, if you were going to develop a, capacity fee program, or if you had one. And, especially, in regards to like the backbone extension that, is an expansion project. And, I guess I'm used to seeing, in a, programmed into a year where the potential fees are going to come from. I'm sure you're, Jennifer is familiar with those types of programs because, that's pretty standard for the cities and the county. Anyway, that was my question.
And I can
Go ahead.
Sure, I'm happy to take a shot at it. So what Barbara's referring to is typically large cities, especially cities that are having a large amount of development. They will develop fee programs that are intended to address all impacts associated with the full build-out of the general plan. So you would have a fee component for parks, transportation, even libraries, water, sewer, traffic, the whole nine yards. We are in a little bit of an influx right now because we're not necessarily the land use authority, so we don't actually plan on a long-term basis for the build-out of each general plan. But we do have our capacity fees, and those do have some long-term idea of, and Chip can jump in at any time, of increasing storage or whatever the component is. And then in that capacity fee, it's layered intended to address the build-out needs of those components. We are in need of redoing the fee study, and our connection fees. So I think once we kind of get done with this process, tackle our rates, then we'll kind of go into that longer-term planning for new infrastructure, capacity increasing infrastructure. That's paired with our need to kind of keep everything, the proposed budget this year equal to or less than what we had last year, as well as the board's desire to have some input on these water line extension programs and some of these larger capacity expansion programs. We're just not proposing that in this particular capital year, but we will be moving on to addressing those issues. And she's right, that's how you would normally do it, because otherwise, usually not one small development can't afford the cost of the infrastructure needed to address all coming development.
Okay. Thank you for that, Jennifer. I hope that answers your question, Barbara.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it, and I understand that what you're doing currently is for just this next budget year, so there's no 5-year projections on them. So, but I would like to know where the backbone extension is in the process, and why it wasn't. I realize it's not going to be built next year, but maybe you could just address that.
Yes, I think one of the things that you're seeing is that we had, because of the general idea of keeping the capital budget at or below what it was last year for reasons related to uncertainty of the financial health of the funds, the Hillsville project, which has a legal risk associated with it, was the bulk of our capital dollars this year, and so it was simply a function of not being able to afford it. There is always opportunity to solicit grant funds and to try to fund it with other sources of funds. We've had some internal conversations about the backbone extension program in itself, and the practicality of facing it versus trying to get money to fund and build the whole thing at once. So I think that's a larger board discussion that we should definitely have, but in the context of this CIP being proposed for this year is not included simply due to revenue reasons.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Leah. That was my question also. Okay, thank you for your call, Barbara.
Thank you.
Once again, for the public, we'll not have scheduled comment time. If you'd like to ask questions during this workshop, just raise your hand and we will try to keep our eyes on the screen. Director Johansson.
Yeah, I always try to come up with a new word. So we all check the air with the fires for purple air. To me, Hemp Hill has kind of created a burple air. And burple air is a skydiving term. If you're on top of someone else who's skydiving below you, that person has taken all your air, and your canopy will collapse. So I think we have to be careful that Hemp Hill hasn't taken the air out of our momentum on some of these projects, specifically for backbone extension program, because, I mean, all the people that have supported this is, Rough and Ready Fire, Penn Valley Fire, Lake Wildwood Association, Farm Bureau, Contract Association, Realtors, Chamber of Commerce, Penn Valley Community Center, and even the Penn Valley Municipal MAC has directed the county to help us find funds, and that is in the process now. they're looking for funds for. So I don't want to lose sight of that project, and I don't want it to stall, because we're talking about new development, and yet here's an area that's being, disadvantaged areas that haven't been served at all. And they need to be served. They've been paying property taxes for 100 years. So I just don't want this approved project, EIR's been approved, I just don't want to lose sight of that project and have it off the table for too long.
Perhaps they could form an assessment district.
Pardon me?
Perhaps they could form an assessment district or a CFD, like
Should have done that for
Cement
Congress.
Hill.
So there's a couple options to deal with that. So typically, I think there would be a little bit more comfort level if we had a 5-year CIP, because what you would see is that project bumped out in future years as that.
It was on the former 5-year CIP.
It was.
Right.
Yeah, so it's not like it's gone away or has been replaced by Hamphill, for goodness sake.
We could, you know, if the board
Yeah.
desired, we could just include it as an approved CIP that's unfunded. I mean, that's a little bit kind of, I don't know what the correct word for that is.
Unnecessary.
I would much prefer that we go through the plan for water. We really understand our supply and demand. We understand how our financial situation is. And then we look at prioritizing the infrastructure needs within the district. Although that project was approved by a former board, I was not part of that board. And I have a different vantage point, and we want to create some sheet that has it on there, that's fine, but I'm not going to support funding that till I see the entire district's needs, and that we have that prioritized within the context of what is an important project, but I'm not just going to say, former board approved it, so here we go, That's where I stand
I'm
as
with Karen.
division.
Okay, I think
it's
the
off
whole
topic.
conversation is a little off our topic right now, and I'd like to get back on it.
Yes.
Although I do concur with all of the discussion about it. I think it's,
Just one quick comment.
go ahead.
Thank you. If it is on our sheets, I think our funding sources are more likely to fund to us, provide, money. But if we are not even considering it, why should they even consider giving us, funds?
Who?
And so that is also why this sheet is a little bit set up in it. So we could put it in an out year with, and just not have it funded at all and just have it as a project. I mean, that would be an option if this is important to the board. Or we could also just take direction to bring this back as a separate conversation. Because I do think it does get intertwined with the other programs that we want to bring back up. Yeah.
Well,
Right.
I think that we've already pointed out that we're talking maintenance things that have to be done, and doesn't the backbone fall into the category of redundant or new capital?
Redundant.
Exactly.
More maintenance.
More new than
It's
redundant.
more, I mean, it falls in that category, so
Yeah.
I think it bears moving into that.
It fits more with the capacity piece in my mind, and the
Right,
capital improvement expansion.
So there was no I just want to make sure we're on the same page. There was no hard and fast rule in this particular program that's being proposed that it couldn't be a new infrastructure. In this particular situation, oftentimes you will find if you have very little money, instead of building new things to maintain, you will focus on maintaining the things that you have,
Right.
and that's really what you're seeing.
Yeah.
So some of these things still would be a new asset from a financial perspective, it just isn't a new piece of infrastructure. So I don't want to get
So
too,
maybe with Barbara's suggestion, we have a separate category?
well, if we could talk about a fee program, I think that that's going to take a little bit of time for us to wrap our minds around, and I would definitely recommend that we focus on some of the larger items on our plate right now before we get into a fee program. We do need to get those water rates done. With that said, it doesn't mean that if there's grant funding available, that we couldn't, as a
Just
one-off,
add
bring
it.
it back. Well, we can bring it to the board as a consideration for
That was
grant application.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, that doesn't prohibit us from doing
And
that.
if the grant money are more likely to be available if we have it on the table.
Correct. I do think that we have taken some previous steps with some of the project approvals that is not necessarily saying it's not a project that's on our radar, it's just not being funded in this year.
Understood. Because we have other priorities.
Okay,
Next project?
go ahead.
Yeah, we are on project one.
Yeah.
And we have three
We
more
keep going.
projects.
And the pizza's getting cold.
And the pizza's getting cold,
You do a
so
lot of et ceteras.
can we do,
How do you want to do, so what my proposal would be is that we move through the projects at a quick clip unless you have specific questions about the project. Now that we've spent a lot of time getting input on the
on the
process.
format and process? Yeah.
Mhm. Because a lot of the information in your packet is on, and we do want your input, and if you have questions, we're more than available now or later. If we spend as much time as we just spent on David, we might use breakfast. Really gonna go against.
Cold pizza for breakfast. Yeah, that was not good.
And there is pizza available.
We don't want to just go not take a break, but just go get some once in a while when we want to?
5-minute break.
That you gotta do.
She said a 5-minute break.
Oh, she
Mom said.
I'll leave that to President Gerwagon.
Go till 6 o'clock.
Okay, next project. Lake Wildwood Treatment Plant upgrades. This one is just gonna take an extra few seconds, because you guys.
Ricky and I already had a question about this one, so go ahead.
I don't remember what the question was.
In the near future, so this project was actually budgeted for this year.
Uh-huh.
This worked out budgeted for this year. When we pulled the clarifier down as part of a maintenance program, do some painting, et cetera, we identified the fact that all the innards of the clarifier were bad, need to be replaced. So we were in the process of getting bids to replace all the existing infrastructure within the clarifier, with paint, cleaning, paint, and tank. Oh, but, I lost my train of thought.
The clarifier and the paint,
So
okay.
we'll be bringing that forward here probably in October, recommending that we use the money that we had slated for this work that I see, that you show on the plan, to do the clarifier work this year. So, with that being said, this work for Lake Wildwood would be for next year, which is, the backwash pumps and the drying beds. So that project would be to, as you can see in the budget, we expect to have that over a 2-year period, because we can do one drying bed at a time, and just kind of ease through that, so we keep the treatment plant running and continue to move forward, so. Any particular questions on that?
Yeah, my question about that when I read this was, is this the big project that was proposed that needs to happen at Lake Wildwood Treatment Plant, or is this the interim project?
Fix it, whatever.
Fix it project.
Big project.
So I thought we were talking
Right,
capital and,
$6 million plus.
rebuild of the whole
No,
thing.
correct, no.
This is not related to that. This has got to keep it running.
This was one that was originally identified as some additional work that needed to be done, when they did that review of the bed project.
Okay.
They identified the intake screen, as well as the drying beds and the backwash pump.
HDR report.
Yeah, right, so that's why that needs to be done, and so, that's related to that. We've got the drying beds that are no longer really meeting the requirements. Now we have to have membranes, and it's no longer, this one does not have those, as well as the other drains need to be installed and improved, et cetera. So that's just a little more background, because we're gonna be bringing something back to you with regard to Big Wildwood and that to clarify stuff.
So just to be clear, the 550 will replace the internal mechanism on the clarifier as well as paint it?
No. So, the 550 that you see here is actually for the drying bed and the backwash pumps that we're proposing to do next year.
Mhm.
What we're gonna be bringing to the board here in October will be I think we had 600 in the budget to do this work originally, the drying beds and the backwash pumps and the intake screen. We're recommending that we use that money this year to replace the internal parts of the clarifier and paint and clean and repair the clarifier tank, and do that in this year's budget, because we need to do it, because it's in pretty deteriorated
Yeah.
condition. Once we pulled it down to do maintenance on it, we just need to replace the inside. And we can do that relatively efficiently.
Okay.
So,
And how much is that gonna cost?
Well, it says right here, 550 or something.
No, that's the confusion.
Oh, that's right, okay, yes,
we're
it's,
probably in the 7 range,
Okay,
ultimately for that one.
yeah, on top of this 550.
Yeah,
Aha, there we go, okay.
because we have money in this year's budget for this work,
right.
as well as maintenance had money in their budget for the painting of the clarifier tank. So we're gonna be requesting that we combine those two and do all that out of our work this year.
Great. How long does that likely anticipate to move out, having to spend the $6 million?
At this point, yeah, we wouldn't be recommending that we move forward with an expansion of the plant at this point. I don't think we're meeting the conditions, especially with the improvement of the clarifier and the
Mhm.
surveys.
Oh, that clarifies my question.
Yeah, me
To be
too.
able to help that, yeah, absolutely.
Instead of $6 million, we're spending $1 million.
Right,
Great.
okay.
Next project, Bill?
Even with all this work, we still only a 2-day supply of water at Lake Well, but
Lake Well still has a limited, one source of water. This would not help or change that. Next one, Hemp Hill, I think that's pretty straightforward.
Been beat to death,
We've
yeah.
been talking about that already, so unless you have any specific questions.
Any questions?
Other than the plan is we're pushing forward to have everything done and build this next month.
nice.
So,
Nice.
That is great.
as long as we can get that done.
Just remember, purple air.
Next one's better tank isolation tanks. This one, the picture really wouldn't have done me any good, so we kind of put a little sketch together on the back side of that. It's basically just being able to isolate the tank and be able to continue to feed the pump station that we have there to feed the upper tank. Not a real big project, but it's something that's needed in order for us to be able to make sure we can continue to deliver water to folks. Next one after that is the ramp repairs. I don't know if you've seen the pictures. You probably haven't seen what it looked like underneath until you saw the pictures there. So we're in
Yeah.
the process of having the structural engineer design that, because we'll have to submit that to the city for approval. So we're in the process of doing that design now, which
This
is.
is what we walk on every time we come here?
Yeah.
Don't think about it. Don't look at the pictures.
I know, really.
What might be.
Another door you can go out.
Yeah, I know.
I got a rat.
So the design engineering that you see as actual years, it's actually this year. We've got money that we spent from the consulting monies we have in our budget to get that design work done and get it submitted, and then we'll build that next year. Sorry, I lost. Oh, back-to-back stuff, messing with me. Christian Life Way, thank you, Chris, for moving forward. This is a pipe that, it's a small pipe, it's for a bunch of 4-inch pipe that was installed back in the 60s, I believe. We've had a lot of trouble with it, with the leaking, we've got roots, et cetera, that are continually having into this, particular, you see the picture, I really get messed up. You see the picture in the back there, which kind of shows you a piece that we've had to deal with in the past. So we would be upsizing that pipe to an 8-inch, which is our minimum standard size, getting right-of-way, et cetera. And you can see in that report that we identified right-of-way as multiple right-of-ways that we're going to need to get. So we'll be working with the property owners to get the right-of-way and deal with all that.
It seems like this is one that's been on the, for years
It
and
has,
years.
I've been reading it on the.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Current list.
So it's fine.
Part of it is we know we need Caltrans right away, so that's a challenge.
Okay.
Next one, shotgun culverts, is on the, that's the next one, yeah. On the DS Canal, right there, Red Dog Road, and you see the pictures there. We call them shotgun culverts because they're two smaller ones instead of one big one.
Right.
So we'll be replacing this with probably a box culvert or perhaps an arch culvert. We'll have to take a look at it and see what makes the most sense there. This is an important hub because the DS feeds the pump station that feeds the treatment plants, et cetera, right?
Mhm.
So that's an important infrastructure to fix. Next one after that is North Bay. This is one, there's some pictures there, I believe, of this one. You kind of get a feel for it. Again, I think we have the same kind of issue with roots, et cetera, this old AC pipe, which is, I'm assuming everybody understands what AC pipe is. For the most part, usually installed in the 60s and 70s. That's called the concrete pipe.
Oh, yes.
So,
How many customers are on this line?
So, there's roughly 50 connections on that line. And this one's a challenge too, because we're gonna have to bore and jack under Highway 174.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
So not an easy one.
Right, which is why you see in here, up on top, we say, we need Caltrans permits, and we need
Yeah.
right of ways for that, which is why we actually only have 80,000 budgeted for this year. It's really just to get through the right of way issues and the permitting sequence stuff that we may or may not have to do, mostly the permit part related to Caltrans in addition to all the right of ways. And then we propose to actually build the facility in '23.
Are these two, this Christian Life and this one, are these ones that we would contract out or do ourselves?
Most likely we would contract these out.
That's the right answer.
Okay, next one, Pet Hill Extension. This one is a raw water facility that we have. We've got a 4-inch pipe. It does have a moratorium on this facility. In addition to that, we have issues with minimum freeboard, lack of flow in there, and overtopping and other concerns that we have to deal with even with the flow that we currently have. So we'd be upsizing that head gate. We'd be looking at some improvements in that first section of the canal, making improvements to the culverts, maybe encasing a portion of this pipe or this canal, to be able to better get the flows through there, through this section.
Capacity, how much will it increase?
It would be based on master plan flows. I don't know what that specific number is, but we base everything on, for design purposes, on what our master plan would suggest for each individual canal. So it would be based on that.
Should people on this, on Pet Hill Extension start signing up now for, they know they want more water?
Generally, we encourage anyone who's interested or wants water to sign up immediately. We have a waiting list
Yeah,
on any canal that's on a moratorium. This one has, currently 27 accounts.
correct.
So not huge, but, it's nice to know the demand for the future, and the waiting list helps us determine, might help rank these a little bit better.
They might get it. Yeah, okay, I'll give them,
Yeah, then we notify them, right, when
Yeah.
the moratorium is lifted, they'd be notified.
give them a call now.
But just to be clear, because we have the drought, stage 2 drought,
Yeah.
there would be no access to the
Correct.
actual water. They can get on the waiting list.
That's correct.
Yeah. Even if you could pull more water, they wouldn't be able to. So the next two, which I think are the last two, we got Sugarloaf Reservoir, which is that one that's located just up there in Nevada City, off of North Bloomfield. There, a sinkhole appeared in that. We've got an embankment that's compromised and leaking. We went ahead and drained it or lowered it considerably. This is a facility that we no longer need. Operations doesn't feel necessary anymore. I think it's about 6.5 acre feet or something inside the reservoir. So this project would basically just be to install a new bypass permanently around it. And just abandon the reservoir altogether.
Is it on our property?
Yeah.
Do we have to do reconstruction or?
No, we would consider whether we want to knock berms down and do some final grading or utilize that as an area for us when we have excess material from other projects to fill it in. It'll just kind of be.
Skate park.
Skate park. And then the last one's Alta Hill Reservoir, similar in terms of the leaking, and it's not a facility that we need. I think it's a little over 7 acre feet for an Alta Hill Reservoir. So we'd be installing we've installed a temporary one around it and lowered the reservoir. We've been told not to drain it completely until we do a CEQA analysis to make sure we don't do any impacts that way or if we have to mitigate, et cetera. So, we'll start that process and then put in a permanent bypass around that. And we will most likely fill this reservoir in to the location of where it's at, and also install a measuring station just downstream of that location.
You know what, Doug, back on the the one up there on Sugarloaf? Yeah. I was wondering about the CEQA analysis for this.
Yeah, it would be the,
Initial study?
Yeah, so we got initial study, mini and neck deck, so we've already reached out to a consultant and had them actually go out there and look to make sure there was nothing obvious right off the top that would potentially impact us for having to drain it. That particular one, we had to drain for.
Oh, I know, I went out on site, I remember.
The other one, we just
Yeah.
lowered it as best we could.
Yeah.
So then we'll go through that process to make sure that we don't have any impacts, or the impacts can be mitigated, however we need to mitigate those.
Okay, thank you.
How close is that to Hirschman's Pond?
Not,
Not at all.
Okay, I think I got through.
Did.
Waters.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you, Chris. So this is just a summary of the project. So what we would be proposing in this year's 2022 capital program would be roughly $5.7 million for all these projects.
Oh, this is a sheet we don't have.
Yeah, this is a sheet that, this would be good to have on that larger
We'll
one.
have
Yeah,
those in the future.
Yeah.
For the presentation, we put this one up here, which just gives you an overall view. So the budget that'll come forward to the board in the future, and if there's some adjustments made, we'll have that number in it. This year's 2021 capital budget was a little over $6 million. I think it was $6 million.
right, it was about 6,
Okay.
yeah.
So we're slightly less than that, is what we were trying to accomplish. Okay.
Good job.
Thank you.
Ken,
All right.
your turn.
Doug definitely set the pace there at the end. I'll do what I can to move through these quickly, or whatever speed you're up to. All right.
Still on 17.
Yeah, but he's got twice the number of projects.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, when you're ready. We'll skip through these unless there's something we want to talk about in particular the summary sheets here, but the same sort of information is presented on those. So Chris, can we go to the first project?
Boy,
2 pages. All right, so the Scotts Flat spillway job, I think everyone's familiar with this one, so we don't need to belabor it. We are expecting the alternatives analysis report before the end of the year, so we'll have a much better idea of what that job is going to be here shortly. And just as by way of a heads up, the current expected construction cost is on the order of $15 million. So as we're rolling through the rest of these, keep that in mind. If there are no questions, then
I have a quick question.
yeah.
We've only spent $678,000 on this project since we started, and that's the modeling and all of that?
So that doesn't include the encumbered amount. So we still have money that's encumbered for the design, we still have money that's encumbered but hasn't been spent yet. And so that's gonna be, part of some of the refinements that we'll have to have in these forms here, that's the dollars out the door.
Yeah, okay. It says nothing in prior actual years? Okay.
The
so
total,
the total spent to date is the actual spent previously, right? And then the $500,000 that is not yet spent, so you just add those together. That's the total obligation.
Isn't the modeling more expensive than that?
Correct, yeah. So this is, the total spent to date is the dollars that have gone out the door, not the dollars that have been committed.
Yeah.
So there is still more committed in terms of modeling and design that aren't shown here.
Beyond the $500,000?
Where's your 500, where you see that?
It's in that same
Right here, budget.
All right, current year budget.
Yeah, so there's leftover money from last year's budget.
There's a
that's still being
rollover,
spent.
too.
There's a rollover in there too,
It
plus
will
an
fix
additional
that.
$500,000 for this year.
Of course, it's a rollover.
Yeah, that's part of working through some of these forms the first time around. We'll get
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But this is a good picture that you can start to look to see, right, even before you
Yeah.
find your plan laid out, that you've got a very large capital expense coming in a relatively short amount of time. That's
Mhm.
going to happen there, address.
Right. Right.
Okay. All right, so, next project here, this is part of a suite of 3 projects at the Chicago Park Powerhouse, and that's the transformer replacement, turbine overhaul, and then the rewind out there at the powerhouse. These are traveling together, due to outage considerations. We get a certain number of hours per year, and then for every 5 years that we can take these, powerhouses down. One of the things that I did want to highlight here is that the transformer, still tests well, whereas the rewind, so the fourth or fifth job down here is the one that's actually driving these. The generator needs to be rewound. All of the test results say that they need to be rewound. The turbine, the transformers were being replaced because it's at the end of its useful life as opposed to testing.
Mr. Judson?
On the rewind.
Yeah.
So what year was that original, sixties, seventies?
No, the windings on there are 1991, so it has been rewound. We rewind the generator to size roughly every 30 years.
So I talked to a good friend, engineer this morning, he said that there was a period of time when all the rewinds had to be a water base and they're starting to rust. And the new ones, they went back to, I think, oil base, or are you finding that out, or, because he's in water pumping, and he, for 15 years at the government, forced water-based windings, and it's just rusting and rotting out.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any problems like that at our powerhouses.
Okay.
I mean, we've gotten our 30-year lifespan out of the last rewind, and it's been an excellent.
They're saying older ones are better.
Yes, that is.
The new ones are junk, not junk.
There's kind of that middle generation that aren't necessarily great. I think the ones that they're making now are reasonably
Are
good.
better.
So, yeah.
But the older ones are superior.
We got, like I said, 30 years is an impressive lifespan on that.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And so do you think that we can do all three projects in the time that, contract says we have to have an outage?
No.
No.
So we will, and that is one of the things that we showed when we were talking the longer-term model, was a significant reduction in hydro revenues in the year that we did construct this.
Because of the rewind, I remember that.
We have a certain number of excused hours, but we will go beyond that. So.
Good information for planning, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So the next job is the Scotts Flat Dam wave erosion inspection. As part of our recent Part 12D independent consultant inspection of the dam out there, they said, well, why doesn't the riprap go up to the top of the dam during the probable maximum flood? You will have water near the top of the dam, so you need to put riprap up there. So we will need to go through that process. This
This is riprap.
Riprap. Large dam.
Oh, got it, okay.
It doesn't wash away.
You're gonna put the riprap up there?
Oh,
I was like, what? That's not a term like.
Let the riprap wash down the river.
Sorry, everyone, sorry.
Sorry, that's waves
I may not be first class, but I'm not
splashing into the
Splashing
dam.
into the dam, and then, eroding the face of the dam
I got
during the probable maximum.
During the.
Which is
Got it.
it's a, what did you call it, a biblical flood?
It's as much water as you can reasonably calculate being on the ground. So, but that is the design standard
Yeah.
that Berkeley is
Yep.
so.
Since Oroville.
And so looking at the last picture on the page, the one that shows the riprap on that picture,
Yeah.
you're saying you just have to add it to the top there or something?
Side of the dam.
Yeah.
One of the rough things as we pull this together, it's on the front.
Oh, it's on the water side?
Yeah.
Okay, that's it, all right.
Yep, we're supposed to catch that, so.
I caught it right off, I go, that's the downside.
All right. So the Rucker spill gate replacement, this is to replace the radial gate that you see there with an overshot gate. In this case, there isn't really an alternatives analysis that was done. We have other overshot gates on the canal. This is just the one that needs to get replaced. They are significantly safer for the employees, and they are significantly lower operational requirements. Essentially, you just set it, forget it, and when the water gets high enough, it overtops and flows over. So that's why we're replacing these, and you'll see later on there's the Christmas tree spill gate, where we're looking to design that and then install it in the next year.
Is this a picture of the old one, or how a new one would look?
That's the old radio gate, yeah.
And is it failing or something, or it just is a hassle to operate?
This is a safety issue, so the current gate is still in serviceable condition, but it's a safety issue, which is why we're replacing it.
So, okay.
Safety for the operator, because what's the issue?
It's both safety for the operator and safety for the facility. When we get a rain-on-snow event out there, we'll experience extreme increases in the water surface elevation out there. And when that happens, it always seems to happen at 2 o'clock in the morning. So you'll have to call out an operator. Generally, they'll get in the snowcat, they'll drive out there, and then make the regulation that they need on the gate. The risk is if they don't go out there and do that, it will potentially overtop the canal, and
You don't want that.
so they'll fail, so.
How long have these radial gates been in there?
Well, that one probably went in with, when the project went in the 60s.
Thanks.
All right. So again, we talked a little bit about this. This is the generator rewind for the Chicago Park Powerhouse. This is a problem that needs to be dealt with. Those windings are testing bad, and it's time to rewind the generator. So the Rollins governor replacement. The governor is what controls how much power the powerhouse puts out, and it brings the generator up to speed before we parallel to the grid. I think this is probably the case of a similar case to what Director Johansson identified earlier, in that we have the middle years of governor out there. If you've got one of the old mechanical governors that was put in the 60s, it's bomb-proof. If you've got one of the new current ones, it's computer-based and works real well. But there's this vintage in the 80s where they were converting between the microprocessor-based and the mechanical-based. And you just can't get parts for them anymore. They fail. This is a real problem for a critical piece of powerhouse equipment. So we budgeted to start designing that next year.
Didn't you show us the one in Chicago Park being one of those old ones?
It is.
An old arm going around and around?
Yep, it's got the fly balls that come out, and
Right.
it tells how fast it's going.
It still works.
The mechanically minded people, yeah, they're definitely drawn to those. So, and they work. They're great, and you can still get parts for them. It's just this 80s vintage equipment that you can get parts for.
Kind of like some 80s cars.
Eighties anything.
All right,
Great picture.
spill gate. So this is another spill on the.
The same picture as what was
It's
it?
the same picture.
But it's the same gate, but it's the same gate, is
It's
that what
the
you're
same
saying?
problem, the same situation. Again, we had some trouble with the picture component of this. Did not have time.
It's okay.
to get
It's okay.
Where, get the pictures taken care of. We'll work on that. So design of the gate next year, and then, installation in 2023.
And did you say you went to these overshot gates because you have other ones, but you didn't really look at a analysis of
Well, we didn't
different?
do a formal analysis, so you can put an Overmeyer gate out there, but those tend to get shot at, and I'm not interested in putting an inflatable rubber gate out there. You can put
Right.
your own gate in there, but the civil expense on something like that is pretty tremendous. You can put just a knife gate sort of
Oh, yeah,
out there, but that's the same problem as the radial gates, so
Right.
it's a pretty.
Are they about the same cost, radial gates and overshot gates? Do they cost about the same?
This is cheaper than the radial gate for this,
Yeah.
because it's gonna be most likely out of aluminum and they're prepackaged, you know, like carbon PVC. And they tend not to plug, right? You set them on the elevation, so it goes in high, it's gonna continue to push over.
Yeah,
Or some of these, depending on how much that open and closing, they can,
yeah.
have issues with it.
Okay, thanks.
Bowman North, and again, we've got a picture of the downstream side of Bowman North. We're talking about upstream lining. The lining on the face up there is a lot of it is the original vintage from when that dam was constructed in the 20s. And
Wow.
there's some significant concrete repairs that need to be made out there. We're anticipating that this is gonna take us a couple of years, and we're gonna approach it similar to Payne Bridge, where we're just gonna go out there every year, cut out a section, replace it, seal some of the joints, and then just move through it as the years go by. Rollins Powerhouse, on my list, the relay protection upgrade. This is a job that we started this year, and actually the board will see a contract to award the design of these upgrades here in October. You'll see that shortly, but this will be the construction and installation of those protective relays.
Can I back up? I'm sorry. It reminded me of something I caught just back on the Bowman North. You have CEQA checked, the box up on the top that looks like it's going to require CEQA, I guess, but there's no funding on the expense line for CEQA.
This would require.
Yeah, and so as we've gone through, when we originally started tackling this job, the thought was that we were gonna have to put a liner across the entire front face of it. As we dove into it a little bit deeper, we determined that CEQA was not necessary.
It's just a replacement.
Just B and B because we're right there at the water surface.
Yeah.
Sawmill the next?
Okay. So the sawmill dam outlet pipe rehabilitation, this is one where we don't have the solution to it yet, so there will be some alternatives analysis type work done. The original pipe in there is a riveted steel pipe that went in, many years ago. And condition is essentially unknown. Everything we've done, we've inspected it, but it's not big enough to get a person up there. So we shut the camera up, we took a look at it. We're gonna have to do a whole lot more investigation into this and determine what the actual repair is out there. So this is the budget to get that job started. This is going to be a regulatorily required project. So we'll figure that out and then be back with the actual solution as time goes on.
And I feel most of these projects don't have CEQA. It seems like this rock dam, it would have CEQA associated with it.
It's replacement. It's just a replacement.
Replacement of the outlet pipe?
This would be as simple as yet.
Looking at the setting?
So it could be very straightforward, and we just don't.
Don't know. Okay.
So.
You had to do a bunch of work in the stream channel below, or something to that effect to.
Yeah.
I wonder if we should maybe put to be determined or exempt instead of just leaving it blank.
Then my question is,
Yeah,
how do
that
you
might
come up
help.
with a dollar estimate for these that's on here, if that's the case?
Yeah.
Oh, if you don't know whether there's.
If you don't know, how, you know.
Right. Worst case scenario.
So what we've done is try to get through the first year, with what we do know, right? We know we're gonna have to send somebody out there, we know that we're gonna have to do some investigations, we know that we're gonna have to, we've looked at getting a smart pig in there and trying to shove that up, so.
Smart pig.
Yeah.
Just learned something.
You know, determine the exact, the other problem is the pipe isn't round, you know, as I mentioned, it's an old riveted steel pipe, so it's kind of oval, so we're not sure that we can slip line it. So there's a whole lot of design that has to be done, and that's the dollar amount you're looking at. In the out years, it's a guess.
Yeah.
If you look at previous projects, right, where you have ideas on what certain things cost, or at least some theories, so you try to come up with the best guesstimate that you can in terms
So
of.
that's what this is.
And then
Yeah.
you refine it as you go along.
Right. Okay. So because these are all pretty much replacement projects, that's why there's no permitting or association.
And some of it we just don't know, right? So some of it, I think TBD is probably the better solution.
Yeah, I would say
Okay.
to TBD, and then once you do this initial kind of analysis, then you might see an adjustment to the cost estimate for the year in the next budget proposed. So
Right.
you should expect to constantly seeing these costs being refined. Because this is our first year out, we've really focused on kind of the year one, but we'll be getting better.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that, this one may go away, right? So if we get the right technology down there and we go and push the pig up there and it says, you know, you've got 3/4 of an inch of wall thickness here, the coating is in good shape, then this may not come back at that point. So we're just trying to give you the best estimate, assuming a whole lot of variables along the way, so.
Okay. Cool looking dam.
All right, so the Fall Creek flume improvements, again, this is, there's money in this year's budget to buy the flume sheets for this job. You'll see that in the October, board meeting, the purchase of that, the materials to do that. The money for next year is, the installation money.
Which one was that?
The Fall Creek.
Fall Creek.
Oh, Chris.
47.
32. So the Bowman SA?
On the-
Oh, Fall Creek Flume, okay.
Yeah, so this is a flume on the Bowman Spalding Canal that transports the water across, and the flume sheets are very old at this point.
Is that like linen flume?
It is,
Okay.
yep.
And
It's just a steel strip.
It is a steel framed linen flume though, so.
That's good, steel frames. Look at those trees.
So this is the replacement of the capacitor bank at Combe North. We're experiencing significant failures out there. The capacitor bank adjusts the quality of the power that comes out of the powerhouse. The bank that's out there now is about 10, 12 years old, and it's at the end of its useful life. So this will replace that equipment out there. It will also allow us to run different flows. PG&E has some interconnection requirements that we have to meet, and with the current bank out there, it's kind of you get 3 settings, and if you can get there in the middle, then you can meet PG&E's requirements. The bank that we plan to install would allow us to operate through just about any amount of water that would come through the powerhouse easily. We've been running into situations here lately where we have to turn the powerhouse off and bypass water because we can't meet the interconnection requirements, so. That'll be with that. All right, so the RTU replacement of power at the Chicago Park, the RTU is a remote telemetry unit. It's a piece of computer hardware that essentially talks to all the other pieces of computer hardware inside the powerhouse, takes that data and ships it off. So you can see it remote and operated remotely. Next slide. The Dutch Flat cooling water project. So this is to add metering and flow control of the cooling water at the Dutch Flat powerhouse. What this will allow us to do is really optimize how much water we're using for cooling versus how much water we're using for generation. Right now, the cooling water comes off the penstock. The existing cooling water flow control is 60s vintage, so it's really, we can't measure it, we can't tell what's going on, so we essentially turn it on and let it run. What this will let us do is throttle that back so we can put more water through the turbine and make more power as we go along. So there will be efficiency improvements with that one. All right.
I had a question about Dutch Flat and Chicago Park were built at the same time.
Yep.
So what about the major upgrades for Dutch Flat? We're talking about Chicago Park.
So Chicago Park, so the cooling water specifically, or?
No,
Reliant.
the major one.
So,
The transformers.
yeah, so the transformer at Dutch Flat is, again, at the end of its useful life, if you look at the charts, but it's still testing well. Dutch Flat was rewound in, say, 2011-ish.
Okay.
So we've got quite a bit of time left on that, and that we're not having the same sort of mechanical problems there, so we've got time on that one.
Okay.
And it's still, the windings are still testing well. Jackson Lake, toe slope protection, again, this is going to be required by the regulators. We're seeing some sloughing near the outlet there. This is a really minor project that's going to be complicated by the fact that it's a very remote spot, and it's going to be just difficult to do from a construction standpoint and getting everything dialed in there. So, but again, it's going to be required. So, next slide, the Fall Creek diversion flume improvements. This is immediately adjacent to the Fall Creek flume. Is another Lennon flume, wooden frame Lennon flume, that the lining needs to be replaced. I think this one kind of highlights how the ranking system is working, and I think it does a good job in that sense, because this job rates lower than the replacement of the sheets on the Fall Creek flume, because of, if we lose the Fall Creek diversion, it's a problem, but it's one diversion along the way in the Bowman Spalding Canal, whereas if we lose the Fall Creek flume, we lose the Bowman Spalding Canal. So this shakes out in these ranking numbers here, the criticality of each of these. This one is lower rated.
So this is diverting water out of the creek into the Bowman Spalding Canal.
Correct, yep.
So that's why they're running together right there.
Yeah, you can see on the far end of the flume, you see it on the right-hand side is the Fall Creek flume. The one that they're standing on in the picture is the Fall Creek diversion flume.
Okay.
All right, next slide. All right, so this is, here regularly, this is another one of the painting the bridge sort of jobs where we're regularly trying to replace sections of shotcrete up there, and, the next section is at the boxcar section, is what we call it. It used to be a train bridge, I guess, through there, or a boxcar sort of bridge is how it got its name. The next slide. All right, so this one is,
Got a picture of it?
is there a question?
Yeah, the picture doesn't, is the flume, it looks like a canal. Am I missing something? The boxcar,
On page,
Yeah.
Now lining is there, boxcar still?
page
Yeah.
74 is a picture of it?
So it's the line.
Just to line it? Oh, so you'll dewater it and line it?
Yes, yep. So this will be done during our annual outage.
Okay.
So this SCADA software upgrade, this is the job that Debbie mentioned yesterday that one of the managers had put in the wrong category. This will be going into the operating budget, so.
You won't say who.
Allegedly. So we will, I left it in here because it is in your packet and I didn't want to skip over it without discussing it, but, again, it does highlight the improvements in the procedures and the and some of the changes. So we'll skip that one and talk about it when we get to the operating budget. The hydroelectric field office radio tower. So this is a program that we've been working on for a while to improve communications between the powerhouses so we can more easily remotely operate them. One of the major hangups we have is a communication problem between the powerhouses, getting data to and from them so we can tell them what to do. This will build a radio tower on the Rapine property that we bought a couple of years ago, where we can talk to both the existing hydroelectric headquarters and talk to the Caleb tower that we have on over on Banner Mountain there. We'll be able to see Chicago Park Forebay, and in the following years we'll improve the communications at Dutch Flat Forebay. So this is part of a communication program upgrade plan that we have. That taken care of. Next job is the fire suppression upgrade at the Dutch Flat number 2 powerhouse. This is similar to the fire suppression job that we're doing at Chicago Park right now, where we will, when the powerhouses were built, they included a CO2 fire suppression system. When PG&E was running the powerhouses, they said, we don't want to deal with CO2. We don't want to install the necessary health and safety protection that goes in there. So we don't have fire suppression at the larger powerhouses at this point because they turned them off and took it out. So this will recertify those systems so that we can put out a fire in the powerhouse. It also adds a clean agent fire suppression system in the control room there. So the personnel won't be exposed in the event of a discharge of CO2. The next job is the Combe South Access Road. This is actually budgeted in this year's budget, but we've run into some right-of-way issues that have delayed it, so we've just put in there this one. Needs to go away.
it does, man. It's been going on for a long
The
time.
same old right-of-way issues we talked about.
Old right-of-way issues.
Yeah.
We have gotten a counter offer from the property owner with regards to what they'd like to see done, so we'll.
Counter offer.
Get back out, do that, so.
I think you need to get
Go back to
involved
the
in
gate.
I felt like I could.
Rose, is that what you said?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
What are you proposing, where are you gonna go back to? Or you said we're,
So we've been in negotiations with the property owner to get the new right-of-way. So we did a formal offer, and now they have come back with a counter proposal that we're looking at, and then we would go back. And at that point, I think we need to all sit down internally and talk about what the next steps are. If we get to an impasse, then there's the next steps that we would have to deal with regards to that, so, which would involve the board.
This is the people that don't want the road going by their house. Mm-hmm.
Well, part of that existing one, we're trying to get a new one, very small piece of property, so we can access our own property and build our road onto
Right.
that and get it down. It's that little component there that.
Yeah, I remember. This has been 3 years, right? At least, I mean,
Yeah.
that was from my first year on the board.
Yeah.
This predates me coming to the district. This is-
Really? Oh, my gosh.
Right-of-way issues can drag on for,
Well, yeah.
especially if somebody's not a willing participant.
Yep. So, but I think we're getting close, as Doug mentioned, we do have a counteroffer and we'll be there, so. All right, next slide. And then the last job here is the construction of a new building for the hydroelectric, department. This one fell pretty far on the priority list as we've tried to figure things out. My hope is next year we can figure out exactly what we're gonna do with this, what it's gonna look like, and what the priority is moving forward for it, so.
You know, the existing facility has some significant issues, even just from a normal accessibility standpoint. So we do need to kind of take a step back and look at it.
Yeah, I remember it was quite crowded.
Yeah. And that is the end of my list. There is a summary there, the cost slide. I will note that that does include the SCADA project, so when that project is taken out, the total program will be, $4,495,000.
Ken, I noticed on your sheets that, constructed by included NID staff. And I'm just wondering if the budgeted amount includes the allocation of staff time to do the work, or is that outside consultants and materials, et cetera?
So the dollar amount you're seeing is only external costs.
Okay.
Yep.
The internal cost would be addressed in the operating budget, or absorbed by the operating budget, probably a better way to say it.
And is that one of the things that is, let's say, part of maintenance that's doing work to support hydro, is that part of what will, in future years' budgets, be allocated to hydro as opposed to the time being recorded but not allocated to the budget as it's currently done?
Correct. So when you do have, when we get a little bit more sophisticated, we can, in the capital program, we can have individual staff, and we can still do it today, right? I mean, charge to the project, and then the hydro fund we can do a transfer back to cover the staff costs. There's a couple ways you could do it. You could direct allocate staff to different funds. We have a habit of saying, you know, water only is in water, and hydro revenue is only in hydro, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. You could even have split funds of people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A busy year for everybody.
I know, and I know this is a lot of work, so I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, congratulations.
It's really great.
Yep.
I think that's it, in terms of discussion. Do you guys have further questions, or?
I think we've lost all of our participants.
Nice to know.
Thank you.
Very good.
This is great.
Thank you.
Anybody that called in the last 10 minutes.
There is one.
Okay.
I don't see him. You see it?
Phone number ending in 25286.
Oh, it's on the panelist list, not on my,
Yeah, right here.
but that's,
So, you know, there was one member of the public here at the end.
okay. That is not a hand raised, right?
No hand raised, so.
Okay, for the public, for phone number 52, ending in 5228, if you'd like to speak, go ahead.
I renamed him, he's already. Wow. They must not need to speak.
Okay. All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
It's a good meeting. We're adjourned.